Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human podcast. This is episode 214, and I spoke with my niece, Jessie Robkin. She is a transgender woman. She is a playwright. She is an advocate for trans rights and other human rights advocacies. She and I talked the night before she left for Chicago to go back home, and it was great. She actually is one of the very first guests I have had on the show way back 4 years ago. So it was really cool to be able to have the conversation again 4 years later about where she is now and in her journey as a human and as a transgender woman and as a playwright as well. So I've now had many family members on the show. My mom, my dad, my nephew Alex, Jessie. I'm just going to keep going through the family. It's great. I love it. My family is diverse and fascinating and lovely and hilarious, and it's such a joy. Speaking of family, it's Father's Day this Sunday, so shout out to my dad. Love you, Dad. And shout out to all the dads out there. In other news, social media, Hey Human Podcast is on Facebook and Instagram. I try to keep both those sites updated as much as humanly possible with different content, so you're not getting mirrored content on both. My Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram for me personally is Susan Ruthism. You can also find me at susanruth.com, where I try to keep everything that's going on in my life besides the podcast, so music and art and all that on there, and acting as well. Also, I was able to paint the album cover for the band Smithfield. That song is actually dropping on Friday. Definitely check it out on iTunes. They're called Smithfield. The song is called We'll Figure It Out. I was going to play a little snippet from it for you. I don't know if this will work. Let's see what happens.
These are dirt roads, sunset highs and heartbreak lows. Together there ain't no doubt, we'll figure it out, we'll figure it out. Ooh.
Ah, it worked. That's exciting. So yeah, it's a great song, and I was really honored that they asked me to paint the album artwork, or the single artwork. Very exciting. Speaking of music to download, if you're in a downloading mood and you're already there on iTunes, check out my music, Susan Ruth. You can find several different albums on there. Surfacing to Breathe, How to Say Goodbye, and my most recent one, All I Ever Wanted Was Everything. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you can do so, Susan at heyhumanpodcast.com. Rate and review Hey Human on iTunes and wherever you might get your podcasts. Make sure to check out the links page on heyhumanpodcast.com. There is tons of information for every episode, and this one is no different, so definitely check that out. Thanks to those of you who have donated to Hey Human. I really appreciate it, especially these days. If you have other places that you're looking to donate, also check out Black Lives Matter and the Trevor Project, the NAACP, and the ACLU, feedamerica.org. It's a great organization. So many great programs out there to donate to. So check that stuff all out. All right, let's get into this episode. Thank you for listening, everyone. Take care of yourselves. Stay safe. Here we go. Jessie, welcome back to Hey Human.
Thank you.
It's good.
I guess I wasn't Jessie last time, was I?
No. Katie. You were Katie. God, yeah. I had to pull that out of the memory bank, so I'm calling you Jessie for
my other dead name.
Yeah, exactly. How you doing?
I am good. Feeling good. I've been sort of out of my normal life for a while now. I mean, I guess everyone has, but I've been especially out of my normal life for a while. So I'm looking forward to getting back into it, I guess, again, starting tomorrow.
Are you flying home tomorrow?
Yes, I fly. My flight's super early in the morning, and I fly back to Chicago. Tomorrow morning.
Are you nervous about flying?
No, I've had to fly a few times now during the pandemic. First to get to Philadelphia for the procedure. and then to get home, and then to get back to Philadelphia for my follow-up appointment, and then back to get home. So I'm sort of used to that by now.
Any suggestions for those of us who haven't flown yet?
Any what? Sorry?
Suggestions for those of us that might be going on a plane?
Be prepared for bring your own food. Most of the airports are no longer serving food. So if you are going to get hungry on the plane, you want to bring your own. They don't serve food on the planes anymore. And
or drinks, right? No drinks either?
They serve, I think, canned sodas and canned beer, and that's it. No, I think they might have water bottles too, but yeah.
So can you buy? I know this isn't really what we're here to talk about, but I am curious. Can you buy?
This is why you brought me on, right?
Yeah, this is all about. This is actually an FAA report. Can you buy water once inside, because you can't bring water because they don't let you bring liquids?
Well, you can bring an empty water bottle and fill it up with a water at the water fountains.
At the water fountain that everybody uses. Gross.
Yeah, there's no contact. Yeah, has a sensor that says that your water bottle's under it and it starts to go.
Oh yeah, that's true.
But yeah, it's just not the same. It's very eerie, and you don't need to budget as much time because there's 4 people in the airport.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Well, I have the TSA thing too, which is.
Oh well, there you go.
Yeah, which is. If anybody listening, trust me, it's so worth the $100 to
the TSA pre-check?
Yes. 1,000%. Yeah, 1,000%. All right, let's get into you. You grew up in Duval, Washington.
I did.
Yeah, and to good parents. I know this because I am related to at least one of them.
At least one. I hope not both. Yeah. That would be really bad.
That would be bad if I was related to both of them. But, through marriage, I'm related.
Yeah, so, sure.
Yeah. Let's talk about upbringing. I know that you were one of my first guests way back when I first started.
I think guest number 3, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, you were a trailblazer with me as I was learning the ropes. Tell me about childhood. So for anybody listening, Jesse, you are transgender. And
yes.
Growing up, none of your family members knew this. Clearly, you knew this, or did you not?
That's a really interesting question. What does it mean to know that you're transgender? As early as preschool, I was starting to notice the differences between boys and girls. And I think starting to feel just a tinge of sadness that I was a boy and not a girl. I'm using air quotes, heavy air quotes on both of those because I think my earliest memory of the difference between the genders of boy and girl was in preschool. One of the kids who was one of the slightly older kids or slightly cooler kids, whatever. I don't know what a cool kid in preschool is, but my memory of this kid was that he was a cool preschooler. And he was asking everyone what their favorite color was, and everyone was saying it. And then he would be the arbiter of whether it was a boy color or a girl color, or whether they were doing a good job picking their colors or whatever. And I said my favorite color was yellow. And I think partly because from when I was in daycare, I had this little action figure of the Yellow Ranger that had been given to me by the daughter of the daycare lady when I left. And I big fan of the Yellow Ranger, big fan of just the color yellow, how bright and lovely it is, right? And so I said my favorite color was yellow, and this guy made so much fun of me. He was like, yellow is a girl color. The girl colors are pink and yellow, and the boy colors are I think red, green, blue, or something like that. And from that moment on, I told everyone my favorite color was red because I didn't want to get made fun of. And just that tiny little microcosm of having to conform to the gender that I was expected to be has stuck with me ever since. Especially once I started transitioning and started looking back at my life and who I was growing up and all the signs that were there before even I recognized it. So yeah, I would say I didn't, in kindergarten, first grade, we used to play boys chase girls. I would always be on the girl team. And then there's another big memory I have of, I think it was in first grade. we had like a Spanish teacher who came in and was teaching us Spanish. And I believe you know this story, and Susan, as you. Anyway, I can't remember if I talked about it last time, but anyway, she was like teaching us different Spanish words for clothing, and when she got to dress, she was like asked if anyone wanted to like model the dress, and no one raised their hands until this little boy named Marcus raised his hand, and it was the funniest thing in the world to us. Everyone was like, "Oh, look, it's like this boy." Marcus, he like was prancing around wearing a dress, and I'll never forget that moment. Everyone was like laughing, and I was like jealous of him. And apparently, I did not remember this, but apparently I went home that day and told my mom about it. And then later that night, came in and asked her if she had like a dress or a skirt that I could wear, and she was like, "Oh, sure," and she like pulled one out of the closet, gave it to me. Obviously, it was way, way, way too big for me because I was like 6 or 7. And I like put it on and like swirled it around a little bit, stood there for a second. And my mom said she like remembers me like standing there considering it. And then like I dropped it to the ground and I just like ran off. Like I was like not, I don't know. So she always sort of suspected early on that like I was going to grow up to be gay or something like that. And then when I started like dating women and stuff, she was like, well, maybe that was just a phase. So she didn't have the words to describe it as transgender back then, but she did have some suspicions based on little moments like that.
Has she said how she felt about that?
She was scared for me. She didn't, obviously she was like she didn't chastise me for wanting to try on this, piece of women's clothing, but she said she really hoped that I wouldn't be, not because she didn't like the idea of me being gay, she says, but because she didn't like the idea of me being persecuted, the world being harder for me being in danger. And that was also her reaction when I came out to her as trans, that she, at that point she was like, can't you just be gay? She said, she didn't say that to me, thankfully. She never like put any of her fears on me, at least not to begin with, not until I started like presenting outside of the home as a woman. But she did have that thing of like, well, wouldn't it just be easier if you were gay? Why do we have to do this? This is just so much. And this was 4 years ago now. More than 4 years ago.
That's not even very long ago, really.
No, I mean, it feels like a long time. That's like a quarter of my life. Or not really. It's not a quarter of my life. It's
don't make me do
math. That's math.
Jesse.
A sixth of my life. I could do the math. I got there. But it's like, the entirety of my adult life has been as a trans woman.
That's
my cat just showed up. So.
Oh, Dizzy.
Yes, Dizzy.
Hi, Dizzy.
Hi, Dizzy.
I am curious.
Want to be on a podcast, Dizzy?
Knowing that your parents are supportive of you, they love you, but there's still this, to me, that's still an othering going on. How do you come to terms with that feeling like, oh, I know that you love me, I know that you support me, but it still feels like there's a caveat built into it. What did that do for you? How did you come to terms with that feeling?
It's a good question. I think acceptance is a sliding scale. It's not black and white. There's all sorts of ways that people can accept and not accept. And every sort of degree or iota of like unacceptance is painful. In and of itself, and every like sort of iota or degree of acceptance is beautiful and warm and makes you feel, triggers endorphins, all that stuff. And then, so like on a grand scale, I think you add up all the pluses and minuses, and whatever it comes out to at the end is sort of your like overarching picture of like how it feels to be, the child of your parents. But each moment also contributes. So like when they say things like that are othering, it would hurt, despite them being overall good and supporting parents. And I would have hard conversations with them. My dad and I would often go out for breakfast on Sundays or Saturdays, once a weekend usually. We would have these conversations, like one-on-one conversations that we didn't really get to have often otherwise. And that summer, when I first started transitioning medically, I had been, there's different definitions of what it means to transition.
Well, I want to get into that for sure.
What's that?
I said I want to get into that for sure.
Sure, yeah. But I can touch on it really quickly, actually. Some people consider themselves as starting transitioning once they realize to themselves that they're trans. Some people do it once they start telling other people that they're trans. Some people consider it when they start medically transitioning. But of course, some people don't quote unquote, medically transition at all. So it's really a personal thing. For me, I consider myself as starting transitioning that summer after my sophomore year of college, when I first started taking hormones and I first started like really taking the steps. I started in therapy. I started really taking the steps towards becoming the person that I am today, and not just thinking about it and talking about it, but actually doing it. So that's what it means for me. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what it is for everybody. But that first summer that I started transitioning, I had a lot of conversations with my dad about this. My mom was much quicker to sort of, I think she really saw the pain I was in and really wanted to alleviate that pain, even if it meant risk of danger in the future, right? Like she believed that, she believed me when I said that this is the only way I can feel better. And so she was all about finding me the resources and, getting me the steps and all the different doctor appointments and stuff. She was all about helping me with that. And my dad was too, but he was a little more hesitant. And I had conversations with him where he would say, well, why don't we just start on testosterone blockers? Why don't you just see how you feel when you're blocking your testosterone, and then if you like it, then you can take the next step to add hormones. That way you're not rushing into anything. And I said, Dad, at one point I told him, Dad, number one, I'm not rushing into anything. This is something I've thought about for a very long time, and the only reason that you know anything about this is because of how long I've thought about it. You believe me when I tell you that, my first step in my process of coming to terms with the fact that I was trans was not telling my parents. That was step 38. That was I had really, really spent hours and hours, days and days, weeks, months, years thinking about this. And I only told you once I was absolutely certain. So there's no uncertainty here. Number two, when you say that you want me to ease into it and stuff, or you think that I should ease into it for my own good, what I'm hearing is you want to do it so that you're comfortable. It's so that you can get used to it. It's not about me. And when I said that to him, he stopped and really thought about that. And to his credit, that's something he's very good at doing, is when you call him on bullshit that he says, I don't know, we can swear, right? Or
I hope so. Fuck. Otherwise, I've got to go back on a lot of episodes and do some work.
Yeah, so anyway, so when you call him on bullshit, he is the type of person who will stop and reconsider the thing that made you call bullshit on.
He is very good at that. I give him credit for that, because a lot of people are not good at that, and he really, his level of introspection sometimes to his detriment is really great.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So from there, he was much more on board, both in spirit and in practice, with the steps I was making. And we've had to have that conversation a couple of times in 4 years as new sort of steps in my transition get added on. But he is now, 4 years later, my parents are attending PFLAG meetings. For those of you who don't know, it's Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gay meetings. Obviously, the acronym was created before there was this boom in trans people that have happened in the last 5-10 years. But anyway, Peak Flag meetings, learning a lot from there. He's been going to this thing in Seattle called Gender Odyssey, which is this great conference on gender diversity and in all its forms in Seattle that happens once a year. And he's come a huge long way, and my mom too. They both come a huge long way in just like understanding these issues and being an ally for me and for trans people as a whole. So I'm extremely, extremely lucky for that. I wish I wasn't lucky. I wish that was the norm. But yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I remember when the family all learned collectively, because you told me over, I think it was over Skype.
Was it? Or did I think I might have sent you an email first, and then we had a Skype about it.
No, I remember because I think you sent me the email after because we were doing the Skype because you were studying acting and playwriting and all this stuff. I remember stopping you and saying, wait, is this a monologue? I didn't realize it was real life exactly.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Yeah, and I
remember where yes. I was. I was like, I was outside. I was outside in college, like sitting in this little alcove in this like church that was on my campus because I went to a Christian university, and that's wild. Yeah,
it seems like a lifetime ago for sure.
But
really
I
remember talking to my dad about, because my dad and I have these deep, deep conversations all the time. We talk every day about everything, and he didn't understand, even though he's a scientist and all that. He had so many questions, and I think his generation in general has a great confusion over gender and sexuality and understanding all that. The funniest thing, his response was, well, how's she going to have kids? And I said, well, with science, duh, kind of thing. But it was.
If she even wants kids.
If she even wants to, right. Well, that was the question I got too. Are you going to have kids? I owe it to the world to have children, that kind of thing. We've already crossed all those bridges. But anyway, it's not about me. It's about you today. Every other day can be about me. But I remember that conversation, actually several, trying to explain it. I think he finally started to understand. But for people listening, I think that is a big confusion. And could you talk about that a bit, about the difference between gender and sexuality and what it all means? And because I know that there are people who go, okay, wait, you dated girls, but you're trans, but now you're this. You know what I mean? Everybody wants to put everybody in a box to make sense of things. And it's just, life is so gray.
So sort of the basics of it is gender is who you are and what you are. And sexuality is who and what you're attracted to. Before I started transitioning, as a disclaimer, I don't still totally understand my own sexuality. Something I've talked about quite a bit in therapy. But before I started transitioning, I only dated women. And looking back, I remember like crushes I would have on men, but it was always like romantic and never like sexual. And then as I started transitioning, I found myself becoming less and less attracted to women and more attracted to men. And now I think I would classify myself as bisexual, currently in a relationship with a man. But my like sexuality has changed and evolved and sort of fluctuated throughout the years as I become more and more close to who I am. And I think part of that is because sex to me in the past had been a means of me getting as close as possible to being a woman. And now that I am a woman, I was back then too, but now that I am embodying the person that I want to be, I'm no longer as interested in sexual relationships with people who are the person that I wanted to be, and now I can be the person that I want to be, and I can be with people who just I want to be with. So that's how I sort of like think of it for my own sexuality, but it's different for everyone, and it's complicated, and I don't think we really know.
Yeah, and I usually go to the default of who somebody wants to sleep with is really nobody else's business as long as they're not hurting anyone.
Yeah, as long as it's consensual. Two consensual adults.
Exactly. When you date now, dating is a shit show regardless.
God,
You're telling me, huh? I imagine that there's a whole other level, especially as you're going through transitioning, and learning, because so much of our dating, so much of our sexuality is how we feel about our own bodies. And if you feel trapped in the wrong body, or at least perhaps betrayed by certain body parts that don't feel like yours even, then you have to be present sexually and emotionally and in vulnerability with another person. That's got to throw all sorts of monkey wrenches into the mix. How have you dealt with the arc of that?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's as like simple as quote unquote trapped in the wrong body. That's a phrase that gets thrown around a lot about trans people.
What's a better way to put it, would you say? Or at least for you.
I think and that's the thing is like, it's different for so many people, right? There are trans women who never get surgery, never get, never medically transition at all. It's a very individual thing. I think a more accurate way to say how I was not trapped in the wrong body, but rather at odds with certain parts of my body. I was, I like what you said, betrayed by, I don't think my relationship with my body and my anatomy was extremely complicated. And I did a lot of work. So for, the listeners, I recently, about 3 months ago, underwent gender confirmation surgery, vaginoplasty. And in preparing for that, I did a lot of emotional work on really coming to terms with the anatomy that I once had. And the reason for that was because when it's not like they, cut off your penis and then build you dig a vagina into you, right? My vagina is just a reconstruction of what my penis used to be. So it's the same body part, the same molecules, the same everything, same tissue, in a different form and serving a different function, or similar but sort of diametrically opposed function. And it was really important to me going into it because I was feeling some nerves that I had never really come to terms with the anatomy that I had. It was always like this little extra appendage that was tacked on that I never felt any kinship with, and it didn't feel like mine. I had done a lot of work to be comfortable in my body, but then that specific aspect of my anatomy, I never really could identify with. It never felt like me or mine. So toward the very end, I was trying really hard to feel grateful for what it does for me, and pour love and kindness and toward it for everything it's done for me throughout the years, despite the nuisance it had been. And I think it helped a little bit with the surgery, bringing a more positive energy in there, because it's the same thing down there now. It's just a different shape, different form. So in answer to your question, it was really, really hard to be sexual with people with an anatomy I didn't feel comfortable with. Without going into a lot of extreme detail, there were certain things that I just wouldn't do, that I wasn't interested in doing. or I wanted to have happen, but couldn't really happen with what I had. And I didn't want people to see or touch it. And so there was sort of a hard line in the sand where I would be willing to get to when having sex, and then would not go past that. And so for the first 3.5 years of my transition, that was I didn't have any sexual encounters at all for like 1.5 to 2 years. And then after a couple of years, I dipped my toes in and started to explore what I was interested in, but there was still that like hard cap on what I would do, because I just didn't feel comfortable doing it.
Now that that your vagina is an integral part of your body, that it's something that you are connected to, which, by the way, people born with vaginas spend their whole lives never connecting to their vaginas.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, the genitalia.
Well, they're not really taught to.
Absolutely, totally. Boy, what a relief that must be. Even to stand shocking. In front of a mirror naked and be like, "Oh, finally!"
It's shocking. It's like, imagine if you had a splinter for all your life, right? And when you don't have a splinter, not having a splinter is not a sensation, right? Like you don't feel good about not having a splinter. Like I don't have a splinter in my foot right now. I feel nothing. It means nothing to me. But if you had a splinter in your foot for 24 years, and then you finally manage to get that splinter out of your foot, you're going to feel so much warmth and like joy emanating from your foot at all times. And like eventually that will go away, but you'll always remember what it was like to have a splinter in your foot. And so your relationship to your foot will be different, right? Like, for that reason, I think, like there are moments when I don't think about my like new vagina, and like I am not, I still have a ways to go emotionally before I feel totally comfortable and at home. I'm very like, I overthink things a lot, and I spend a lot of time in my, I'm a lot like my dad, I think, in that way. I had just gotten used to having a penis. It was like uncomfortable. It like interfered with some of the clothes that I would want to wear, and like get in the way in sexual encounters, and just like generally be a nuisance, and sometimes a painful nuisance. But it was something I was just living with because I'd had it forever. And now that I don't have it, it feels so natural and so like normal that like there are times when I don't even think about it. And then when I realize it and like realize that I'm not thinking about it, that in itself is like a sort of surreal absurdity to like come to terms with. And, before you get surgery, even when it's something you've been thinking about for 4 years and knowing you want it to do, you get, or at least I got nervous. I got, like, what if this is a mistake? This is a irrevocable change. This is a huge, huge step that I can never go back from. I don't like my penis, but what if a vagina is worse? Like, all these thoughts going through my head, second guessing things leading up to it. So having that, like, and then like 2 weeks later, when I first get to, or like a week and a half afterward, when I first get to see my new vagina being covered in bandages and stuff and packing and all this medical stuff, it's a massive relief to be like, oh, I was right. This was what I wanted. This was what I needed. And like you said, when I see myself in the mirror now, it's a sublime feeling. It's euphoric. I look in the mirror and I recognize what I see, like in its entirety. And of course, there are still things that I have like body issues about and stuff like that, but it's unquestionably mine and it's unquestionably me.
Do the doctors talk to you about things like pleasure and stuff like what to expect around that arena?
Yeah, they talk about that. Ostensibly, I am still, well, not even ostensibly, I'm definitely still able to orgasm. I know that firsthand.
Literally.
Yeah. I haven't had sex yet. I'm not really going to for a couple of months. But theoretically, it still should be pleasurable. I have like a G-spot. I have a clitoris. All the nerve endings still work theoretically, although there's still some that I think are still waking up a little bit. So yeah, it will still be a pleasurable act. They don't like really walk me through stuff beyond like pointing out where everything is. But that's something that I'm looking forward to exploring with my boyfriend when we get a chance.
And he's been supportive of everything.
Oh yeah, it's remarkable. He's it shouldn't be remarkable. I'll just say that. Like, I'm going to praise him, but this is how all men should be. But anyway, he is a cisgender heterosexual man who I started dating in October.
How'd you meet?
And we both play Magic the Gathering, and we met after I kicked his ass in a game of Magic the Gathering at a local game store in Chicago. And we like just started chatting, and then, the next time I saw him, we were paired up again, and then that afternoon he asked me out. And then we dated for a while, and then it like fizzled, and then we sort of rekindled it a few months later when we reconnected at a larger tournament in Indianapolis.
Do you feel when you meet somebody like that you behave, I'm going to use the word just normal, but what the fuck, I don't know what that means, but just like if I meet a guy and I say, how do you do? My name is Susan. I don't say, and by the way, I'm this, that, or the other.
So this is actually a longer, that question, the answer to that question is longer and more complicated than you might expect. I had been dating someone for about 9-10 months, something like that, or 8 or 9 months, until November of 2018. A couple months after that, I was like getting back out there, and I had a bit of what I sort of think of as like my hoe period, where I like dated and casually dated and hooked up with like many more people than I, thought I was going to. And I kept like dating people for a couple weeks, and then it fizzled for one reason or another. And I'd have some people who I'd date for longer, but it was like always explicitly not serious. And it was always a good question when I would tell people that I was trans. My Tinder profile, which I still have because my boyfriend and I are non-monogamous, but my Tinder profile both says in the little thing where you put your gender, it says trans woman, and then I also have at the bottom, I'm trans, so swipe left. So anyone I match with on Tinder knows right off the bat that I'm trans. And a lot of people will like match with me and then like unmatch with me because they see that and they leave, which honestly, good riddance, saves me the trouble of learning that the hard way. People I meet in real life, I mean, it's hard to know. Like, there's a phrase used in the trans community called passing, which means like you pass for the gender that your experienced gender, right? So I am a trans woman. I quote unquote pass for a cis woman, would be what the phrase would mean. And I think there's a lot of problems with that phrase. I don't like because it sort of if you like extend the meaning of that phrase out, it's like, okay, well, if you don't quote unquote pass for a cis woman, does that mean you fail as a woman, right? Like, there's also this, it's so gendered and colonized. Like, what does it mean to look like a woman? Is so, and like this sort of like, it's, you look like a white woman, right? Like, it's so many like fucked up things about the phrase passing. But there's not, I mean, like, I think the phrase a lot of people use now is cis assumed. How you cis assumed, cis hyphen assumed. I think in a lot of aspects of my life now, I am cis assumed by strangers. But once you start talking to me, once you start like hearing my voice and stuff like that, it's, I think the way I've had conversations with my boyfriend about it, where we talked about when he first started dating me. I asked him, like, did you like know I was trans, or when did you know I was trans? And he said he doesn't totally know exactly when it was. It might have been even the first conversation, or it might have been later. I think because, so I'm relatively tall. I mean, we're the same height, but, tall for a woman, 5'11", if you don't mind me saying.
I'm almost 6'1", so I understand being.
Oh, are you? Oh, yeah. I think I'm like 5'11" and a few, like 3/4. Anyway.
That's how I can send you my shoes.
Yeah, exactly. Which is extremely clutch. I'm tall for women. I don't often, like, my voice sometimes slips into a lower register. There's just sort of monikers that you can use to like realize that I'm a trans woman. But he says, even though like it's you're clearly a woman, even if sometimes you're clearly a trans woman. Like I give off like, I think like a feminine enough energy that like people will gender me correctly 99 times out of 100, and like I don't get like harassed or stared at. And I think people can sort of put the pieces together once they get to know me that I am trans, especially because that might be the other thing. I'm extremely like vocal about trans issues on Facebook and Twitter. So the moment he was like friends with me on Facebook, he saw that I was like tweeting about the trans military ban and things like that, or posting about it. So no, I think I've had to have a conversation with people sometimes before I think I'm going to hook up with them, saying, hey, just so you know, I'm trans, I'm pre-op, I am, comfortable with X, Y, and Z thing happening. I'm not comfortable with X, Y, and Z happening. Or I guess like W, V, and whatever. I'm comfortable with these things. I'm not comfortable with these things. And I just want to like let you know ahead of time, so that we don't have to have an awkward conversation in the moment. So I've had that conversation many times. I never had it with Isaac, my boyfriend, the first time we started dating, because we never really got to that point. We would like go on dates. And he has said that he had to do a lot of internal sort of reckoning early on. And he said, as he was telling me this, he said, like, I recognize that this is like ridiculous that I had to do this. And looking back on it, it's absurd. And but this was who I was at the time. I had to do some reckoning with my own sexuality to when I started dating you, and like what it meant that I was attracted to you. And of course, obviously, all it meant was that I'm a straight woman and you're an attractive woman. Or sorry, I'm a straight man and you're an attractive woman. But at the time, it was like, but you're trans, but like I'm, and so our relationship fizzled back then. And he said that he was a little bit grateful that he didn't have to like really come to terms with what it meant at the time. But when we reconnected and started dating again, it was just so clear to him that like it became obvious to him at that point that like there's no issue if he's a straight woman or straight man and I'm a woman, that like of course it's a natural pairing. And so he's always been like supportive of my transness, and was immensely supportive and helpful, especially in the months leading up to it, and then immediately following, because my first few weeks after, really my first month and a half after surgery was miserable, and he was extremely, extremely helpful and supportive through that. So it's possible. It's extremely possible to be a trans woman and date cis het men.
It's interesting though, because you said just a second ago is like a natural pairing. Isn't it funny how we don't even realize when we throw in words like that? Like, what does natural mean? Like, what does normal mean? Is there some point in your life where you get to say, I'm a woman, not I'm a trans woman? Do they always go together? Is that part of the identity?
Yeah. I think I think I will always claim the identity of trans woman because that's what I am. I don't think that's a qualifier, the fact that I'm trans. I think it's like saying I'm a tall woman, I'm a brown-haired woman, I'm a white woman. It's just an adjective that describes it. And when it's relevant, it's something that I would say. I think like when the fact that I'm trans doesn't matter, right? Like, on my driver's license, it just says female.
Thanks, Washington State. Whoop.
Yeah, although that's, you can change your gender, I think, in almost every state, if not every state.
Is that
Washington State has the X gender, though, which is pretty sweet for non-binary people.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, you can legally get your gender changed in most states, if not all of them. I don't quote me on that because I don't know if it's all of them, but I know it's true in Illinois and it's true in many, many states that you can get your gender marker changed. Sometimes it's harder. Sometimes you have to like get letters from therapists and stuff, which I think I might have had to do. I don't remember what that process was like. It was a bit of a blur.
How has fear played into your life thus far? I know that, when you told everyone in the family, that, like your mom, having the immediate concern and fear for your safety because the likelihood of the trans violence is so great compared to cis-normative violence. Have you experienced that, or have you been well insulated from that? Other than knowing that it's out there and reading, you know what I mean?
Yeah. My first few months when I was transitioning, I was very naive. I thought that my timeline for like when I would be able to be out and about as a woman and look like a woman and, behave like a woman and all this stuff and be treated as a woman was much shorter than it was actually going to be. I was like, in 6 months, I'll be out and about, like being a woman, all that stuff. But of course, that wasn't really true. Some very specific things happened that contributed to the fear I felt as a trans woman within the first 6 months of my transition. The first thing was, so I went to school in Southern Indiana. I went to college down there. And I remember I was walking home from a party at the house that you went to. The party was, I remember that one time that you went to a party in my college town.
I do remember.
Yeah, so I was walking back from that house. Remember, it was far away from where I lived, right? It was a bit of a walk. And I was walking home, and I was like wearing like a skirt and like, a women's blouse, no makeup or anything, did not really look like a woman, whatever that means. And I was walking home with a couple friends, and I heard some laughter approaching, and this car was driving by with their window down, and one of this guy leaned out the window and was like, "Hey, you faggot," at me as they drove by. I was like 11, it was like 1 a.m, I think, maybe midnight. Terrifying experience, humiliating experience. I went home, I changed into just like, androgynous basketball shorts and like cried myself to sleep. That was the first thing that happened. That was the first time I was like experienced. I had people like stare at me and some laughter before then, but like that was my first time like someone calling me a faggot on the street. The second thing that happened was a few weeks after that. Donald Trump was elected. And I remember that night. Everyone remembers that night, but I remember that night. And I had nail polish on, teal nail polish, which was my favorite color of nail polish. And that night I was sobbing in the stairwell of a dorm. And I had just gotten off the phone with my parents. bawling. I was asking myself, how can I even transition in this world if this is what the country's like? And I was looking at my fingernails and realizing how vulnerable they made me, and I started scratching them off I was scratching off the paint with my fingernails until it was all gone. It was painful, and it was really, really fucking sad. And that next morning, and for the rest of my college career, I stopped presenting as a woman. I kept transitioning. I kept taking hormones and stuff. But in public, I would just wear baggy androgynous clothes and kept my head down and just tried not to be noticed. Of course, I was writing for the school magazine about trans issues, and still posting on Facebook and Twitter and stuff and being vocal like that. And when I would go to parties at a friend's house, I would dress the way I wanted to. But during the day and out in public, never ever would be visually anything other than the weird white guy with long hair and baggy clothes who, kept to himself. And so I didn't really face violence after that, at least not in Evansville, the town I was in, because I made myself invisible to avoid it, which was its own kind of violence, emotional self-inflicted violence. And it had a pretty profound psychological impact on me that I spent my first year in therapy once I graduated college was about unpacking what that felt like and what that did to me, and coming to terms with who I am and getting comfortable again presenting the way I wanted to in public. So yeah. A long answer to your question of how fear has impacted me.
No, it's great. I mean, I encourage long answers. We have all the time in the world. I remember at that party, and I'd had a couple drinks,
mm-hmm.
and for me, referring to you in your correct pronoun was still relatively new, and as I was drinking, my brain shifted to an older pattern, and I misgendered you. And then I was so horrified. I remember standing in that weird little hallway, there was a door, and I misgendered you. And then I was like, oh! And then I started apologizing profusely. And I remember you said to me, stop, this is worse. And I think that's something, I really want you to talk about that as well. If I don't know if you remember that moment.
I don't remember that. I mean, that incident happened a billion times in my career, not with you specifically, but with,
I don't doubt it.
Yeah.
But I've seen since then, because I follow a lot of trans accounts and I pay attention to, obviously all of that. And I've heard that over and over again and seen that over and over again, that the whole, if you misgender me, say, oh, I made a mistake, move on, because the apology is almost worse. Can you explain how that made you feel?
Yeah. I think an apology is fine if it's short and sweet, right? Where it's oh, sorry, I meant to say she. Or thank you for correcting me, she, right? I think there's a lot of, to explain why it's worse, to go into a long apology, and there's a lot of, there's several reasons why it's worse, I think, there's several sort of, okay, first of all, a long apology puts them in an awkward position where they feel like they have to forgive you and make you feel better for them being hurt, right? If I accidentally refer to a trans man as she, and then I'm saying, oh, I'm so sorry. I think of you like this. I'm the worst person ever. I feel so bad. All of a sudden, that puts them in a position where in order to get you to stop, they have to be no, you're okay. Like, they have to make you feel better, right? It's making your embarrassment and guilt
about you
supersede their supersede their discomfort and their and that emotional pain. There's also like they also shouldn't have to forgive anyone for it, right? It happens a lot with family, because you know the person for so long as a different gender, and then it becomes and then when they are their correct gender, it can take time, and it takes a long time, and I think most trans people, especially who first start transitioning, are understanding of that, and therefore, they're expecting that. But as time goes on, misgendering is painful, and it's, unkind, and it's understandable in certain circumstances, but, it's something that should be fixed and corrected. And it's not the trans person has no obligation to forgive the person who is misgendered. Then, it's not about forgiving that person, because it's not that kind of error, right? Forgiveness comes from the person not making that error anymore, right? I have no interest in forgiving someone. I want to see their actions change, and then it's great, you have moved on, and there's no reason to forgive you anymore because you have, And I believe that extended misgendering, repeated misgendering, comes from someone not really, truly. I mean, I'm trans, so people might think that that gives me an edge at remembering people's pronouns, but that's not true. Everyone is a person, and when someone changes their pronouns around you, I don't have this magical superpower as a trans woman to just know that, right? Or to immediately flip a switch in my brain. That's not how being trans works. I just know what it's like to be misgendered, and so I make a concerted effort to change my framing of that person in my brain to reflect their true gender. And I still make mistakes sometimes, but I also know that it's painful to be, to have someone apologize profusely to you. So when I make a mistake, I say, "Oh, sorry," and then correct it, or I say, "Oh, thank you for correcting me." But yeah, it's as simple as making a note in your head, this is what this person's gender is now, and catching yourself when you make the mistake in your brain, even when you don't say it out loud. You're just "Oh, sorry," and and really putting in that effort, because it takes some time, it takes some effort, it takes some work, and to show the person that you care about them, you have to just sort of do that work. I remember your mom at Christmas Eve this past year.
I'm scared to hear this.
She referred to me as he or something. She misgendered me in some way, and she was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. She's like, it takes a while," and I'm like, "Well, it's been 4 years," and then it was just silence for a second, and then Uncle Matt said, "She has a point," and then everyone laughed, and then we moved on. But it's true. It was an awkward situation, but also it has been 4 years at that point. It's how long does it take, right? I understand it's not easy, but at a certain point, it shows that you're not putting in that effort. And I think she really took that to heart in that moment. So all water under the bridge. But it was a good example of at a certain point, you have to really, really just put in the work to say, no, this person is no longer a he, this person is a she, and I'm going to refer to them as such, refer to her as such, right?
Yeah, and I think there's a reason why it's called a dead name also. It's a name that doesn't exist anymore in your frame of reference.
Yeah, and I think it really encapsulates the pain that name sort of invokes in someone. I still swipe left on everyone who has my dead name on Tinder. I refuse to match with anyone who has that name. I'm never gonna have it's absolutely not.
How do you feel about your uncle then? Who has your name?
He's a different. I mean, I don't love hearing it, but it's a different situation where he's always been. It's not like I have friends with that name, who I refer to them as their correct name, but like I have no interest in like I couldn't be like having sex with someone with that name and like no, I'm not gonna say it. Like I'm not doing that.
That makes total sense. I'd like to move into you as a playwright. You wrote.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, you wrote a play, and let's talk about that. What inspired it, and what was that like to create it, and get that out into the world.
Yeah. Remind me, have you read it?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't get to see it performed.
Yeah. You'll have other chances, I hope.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Yeah, I wrote a play called Austin's Home about a trans man who comes home for Christmas, and it's his first time being home in a few years, and his parents don't know that he's trans. There's also an element of shared family trauma because before he had left his parents' home, his sister had been down at the they had been down at the beach, and his sister drowned. And so the play is about forgiveness. It's about trauma. It's about reconciling with the past and, coming to terms with what we have here and now. It's what you do when life happens to you. Like, how do you move on from there? How do you see each other for, the people that they really are? The play was inspired by a good friend of mine who is a trans man. And I was the first, so I went to a theater school in Southern Indiana, I think I mentioned that. And I was the first person in my theater department of about 120 people to transition. And it was this whole to-do early on. I sent an email out to the entire department letting them know. And they changed my name in the roster and all this stuff. And for about 4 or 5 months, I was the only trans person in the department. And then my good friend came to me at a party, very drunk, and whispered in my ear that he was trans. And a month or two after that, he came out and he started transitioning. And his mom was not the most supportive early on. And I had a lot of conversations with him where after his mom would say something hurtful to him, where I'd comfort him. And I wrote this play at the time as a 25-minute play for this playwriting class I was in. I wrote this 25-minute play about I used a different name, but about this guy coming out to his mom. I wrote it for him, and he performed it, and he was read that part in class. And it was very rudimentary, very soapboxy, trans 101 type play at the time. And that was 3.5 years ago, something like that. A couple years later, I had this play kicking around in my head. I wanted to expand it into a longer thing. And a couple years later, I finally sat down and did it. And it turned into the 2-hour thing that it is now. But it's always been for and about my friend, who his mom is great now. She extremely, extremely supportive. But it's sort of about them.
I think I met him at the party.
I think you did, yeah.
Yeah. You have a lot of nice friends.
I think that would have been just after he started transitioning too.
I think that's right. I recall that. Yeah. Fun party. It's a good time. We played some beer pong. Yes, that's right. I think, didn't we kick ass at the beer pong?
Yeah, we did.
I'm pretty sure we did. I had to have your friends had to drink my beer because I can't drink it because I'm celiac.
Yeah.
We
did a very good job.
I was on fire. That was the night that we learned about your other friend who has the insane...
You got to get him on the podcast.
I know. Oh my gosh. murder and intrigue at holiday theme parks.
Yeah.
Next on Hey Human. Anyway, well, so Austin's home. You're continuing to develop it, and the plan is to hopefully put it on again in a larger context, or?
Yeah. So before the pandemic, I had been accepted to workshop the play at the Great Plains Theater Conference in Omaha, Nebraska. Then the virus happened and it got canceled, but it seems like it might happen still in 2021. We'll see. I don't totally know. There's a lot of uncertainty. But yeah, I have to develop it further. I have come to a point where I don't think I can really do much more work on it on my own. I definitely need like a developmental team of like a dramaturg, a director, some actors, and like really dig into it. But yeah, it's the sort of next step would be to like have it at a like conference or two like that, and then hopefully start like trying to get it produced at a theater. In the meantime, I also am working on other plays as well. So it's sort of a process where once one is in this stage, it's sort of in stasis for a while until it gets a chance to bump forward, basically.
Is the trans voice what you're aiming for in your work, or is it further reaching?
In like my work in general?
Yes.
I definitely write a lot about trans issues, but I don't think I don't think my plays are specifically about trans people. I don't know if I would ever really write a full-length play that doesn't have trans people in it. And the reason for that is I've never been in a space that didn't have a trans person in it. So I can't, every space that I've been in has at least one trans person in it because I'm in it. And so I'm not super interested in spaces that don't have trans people in it because that's not my lived experience. I'm also just like a passionate advocate for, there's the whole debacle of like cis actors playing trans roles, like the Jared Leto's and the Scarlett Johanssons, etc. And then like Matt Bomer's, or Bomer, or however you pronounce his name. Anyway, so I'm a big advocate on like creating trans roles for people and then using my position as a playwright, because playwrights have quite a bit of say in like how, unlike with movies, playwrights have a huge amount of say in like what their plays look like when they're produced. And so I would have the power as the playwright to ensure that only trans people get those parts. So there's a little bit of like, that sense of like social justice issue, but also just, I believe strongly in like putting trans people on stage and having people, cis people see them, and also giving trans people a place to see themselves on the stage. I had a lot of people so I did like a one night play reading of Austin's Home. And I had some trans people reach out to me, including some people who I didn't know were trans until they reached out to me, who reached out and said that it was their first time really feeling like they saw themselves on stage, and like what it meant to them to have that experience. And that is, all things, everything else aside, that's the number one reason, right? I have such a deep love, and I love trans people. I think that we are some of the most resilient and, I use the word, I'm going to use the word courageous, although I don't like when trans people are described as brave usually, because it just feels so honestly demeaning, and also just like, we shouldn't have to be brave. There's nothing brave about it. It's a necessary thing, but we are such a beautiful people, and like the amount of shit that we take in our lives and just keep pushing is remarkable. And for so many of us, especially trans women of color, Black trans women, just being who we are is a death sentence because of the, hate that's in the world. And I love trans people so much. I don't know how else to put it, but
I think that's a beautiful way to put it. How might people find resource, whether they are discovering or know who they are and are trying to figure out how to go about finding better resources, or for people that don't know anything about what it's like to be trans? Can you recommend maybe a book?
Resources for trans people or for people who want to learn about trans people?
Both.
There's all sorts of resources out there. There's I early on, like when I first started transitioning, I didn't really know very many trans people. I did a lot of Googling. Ask Transgender, the subreddit, r/Ask Transgender. Great resource for almost any question that you could have about trans people has been asked there. There's also, websites like the HRC, although I have some problems with their politics, and things like that have resources for learning about how to transition, what it's like, resources in that regard. There's, seek out the trans people I can't think of any trans person that I know who would be unwilling to talk to another person who wants to transition about it, right? Like, I have several people in my life who are trans and who one of the first things they did when they started transitioning was talk to me and ask me how to do it. For people who want to see what it's like to be trans, I'm going to plug a friend of mine's web series, because I think it does a brilliant job of sort of highlighting many of the issues trans people face, and it's brilliantly done, and it's only 30 minutes in total. Each episode is 6 minutes long or something like that. But it's called The T by B. Cordelia and Daniel Keary.
The T.
It's the T, just the word, the article, and then the letter T. And it's free online to watch, and I highly, highly recommend it. It's about a white trans woman and a black gay man and their friendship and some of the struggles they face in this microcosm. Brilliant, brilliant piece of work. And just seek out trans storytellers and listen to them, right? I think that's a huge thing. If you want to know more about trans people, just listen to us. Follow us on Twitter.
There's a lot of great books. There's great resources. It's Pride Month. June is Pride Month, so there's
absolutely
the internet is being flooded with information. I asked you specifically because I didn't know if you had some favorites, but I for sure on HeyHumanPodcast.com will put a list of resources as well.
That sounds great. Yeah, it's been long enough that I don't really have to Google trans things anymore. So the resources that I would have are pretty outdated.
Do you have a favorite trans writer?
What's that?
Do you have a favorite trans writer?
Oh, that's a good question. Besides me? Just kidding. I'd have to think about that. I can send you stuff after we get off. But yeah, definitely the big thing is don't ask trans people about their experiences. That's something that we get a lot of. There's jokes that we make people pay for Trans 101, because we get a lot of invasive or really rudimentary questions about being trans. So even more than where to go, where not to go is just to in the DMs of trans people, just asking them questions. Don't do that unless you yourself are trans and are having specific questions about how to transition. Rather than that, just if you have friends, just pay attention to them, follow them, and hear what they themselves divulge freely and learn through that. Because you don't want to just sort of, I am not an encyclopedia. I am not a.
Wait, you're not Google?
I know, and the joke is Google exists. You can Google your questions. There is so much information on the internet about that stuff.
Yeah. How might people find you?
Oh yeah. You can find me on Twitter at Jalana Lana. My middle name is Alana, so it's JALANALANA. So it's J Alana Lana. JAL. Yeah. Anyway, you get it.
There'll be a link. I'll put a link on Hey.
That sounds great. Yeah. And then maybe I should just change my Twitter name to something more.
No, I think
easily findable.
It sings. I like it.
And then you can find me if you want to read my work. If you have a New Play Exchange account, I have Jessie Alana Robkin on New Play Exchange. There's I think there's like a 10-page sample you can read for free, or if you have an account, which costs like $5 a month or something like that, you can read Austin's Home on there for free. And yeah, there will be a website eventually, but I don't have one right now.
Okay, get on that.
I know, it's such a pain though.
Oh, it's the worst. I know it. Jessie, this has been fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. I know that you are probably busy getting ready to fly home tomorrow, so...
Yes, actually some packing I've been putting off.
Yeah, well, I usually wait till the night before around midnight when I have to fly out at 6, so I understand.
Yes. Me, exactly.
Yeah, I love you.
Are we related?
I think so. I love you, and I'm proud of you.
I love you too.
Living in a crazy-ass world. We're all doing so much to just hang in there. I'm proud of me, too. I think we're doing...
I'm proud of you, too. I'm proud of everybody. This is a huge time.
I know, it really is. And, yeah, so, well done, family. I love you. Thank you for being on the show.
Yes, of course. Thank you for having me.
Please travel safe tomorrow and stay healthy. Yeah?
Yes, we'll do. You as well.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thanks for listening. Rate and review Hey Human on iTunes. Take care of each other.